Casablanca, often said to be one of the greatest American films of its era. Its witty dialogue, beautiful romance, memorable song, and iconic quotes have given it a lasting impression in film history. Even someone who has never seen it has heard someone else say, "Here's looking at you, kid," or "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life." In modern times, we see Casablanca as a great classic black and white film about a sweeping romance, but in 1942, when it was released, the film was more easily identified as a political allegory. An allegory is a commonly used literary device in which characters or events in a fictional narrative in novels, film, and other media represent or symbolize other things, ideas, and concepts, often on a larger scale than is in the text. And this is definitely used in Casablanca. For the handful of people who have never seen Casablanca, a brief summary may be in order. It is set after the start of World War II, but before America's involvement. It takes place in Casablanca, a city in unoccupied French Morocco. Rick is the owner of a popular cafe. He is seen as only looking after his own interests and remains neutral when it comes to talk of the war. Rick previously had an affair with a married woman named Ilsa. He was unaware she was married at the time. She and her husband, an important figure in the resistance named Victor Laszlo, coincidentally meet up with Rick at his cafe. The Nazis are after him and would love nothing more than to put him back in a concentration camp. After reuniting with Ilsa, Rick makes plans for them to be together, but Rick changes the deal and sends both Ilsa and Victor to safety in America. He lies to Victor and says that he and Ilsa are no longer in love, sacrificing his own happiness and redeeming himself. So with these basic facts in mind, how is this love story as much about politics as it is about romance? In the beginning of the film, a man is killed next to a picture of Philippe Pétain. The film is rather blunt in its suggestion that Pétain is responsible for such a death. For the unaware, Philippe Pétain was a French politician who was largely responsible for the surrender of France to the Third Reich. In spite of Pétain's armistice with Hitler, French citizens formed a resistance movement against the German occupation. More on that later. As the film progresses, we are introduced to Rick, played by screen legend Humphrey Bogart. Rick is more than simply one of the only American characters in the film, though. Rick is meant to be a stand-in for all of America, particularly the American government in the early 1940s. A character, Ferrari, tells Rick, in regards to his pianist Sam only playing at Rick's place, that isolationism is no longer a practical policy. Not very subtle. A few minutes later, Rick tells another character, Louis, that he sticks his neck out for nobody, to which Louis responds, "A wise foreign policy." In this instance, Rick is meant to embody the policy of isolationism that was prevalent in the United States during that period. Isolationism, as a government position, is a means of isolating a country from the affairs of foreign nations by declining to enter into alliances, particularly those that may bring a country to war, or to enter into any conflict that does not immediately and directly affect the interests of the country. Although commonly brought up as an American policy that relates to the nation's slow entrance into the Second World War, isolationism was actually popular in the American government from the onset. George Washington himself once said, quote, "The great rule of conduct for us, in regard to foreign nations, is in extending our commercial relations, to have with them as little political connection as possible." Unquote. Rick's refusal to help others, or, as he puts it, stick his neck out for people, is meant to mirror the mindset of the American government and many of its people during the early stages of World War II. America, although sympathetic to the plight of Europe, did not enter into armed conflict until Japan forced the issue with the attack on Pearl Harbor, leading America into war with the Axis powers. Casablanca is meant to be both criticism of this late arrival to the fight, as well as a patriotic shot in the arm for finally joining the Allies. If there is any confusion about the fact that Rick is meant to symbolize all of America, another scene clinches it. Louis and a German are discussing Rick. The German says he was under the impression that Rick is only another blundering American. Louis says that an American should not be underestimated after America helped defeat Germany in the First World War. In Casablanca, Rick is America. The film takes place in early December 1941, immediately before America entered World War II. Rick even mentions the date, so that the audience is well aware that we are watching the story about an American taking a stand when dealt with a horrible situation, right before America must take a stand when dealt with a horrible situation. The events of the film, mostly taking place in one city except in flashback, mirror what is happening politically on a world scale. In the end of the film, Rick must make a decision: leave Casablanca with the woman he loves, which would strand the honorable Victor Laszlo, or send Laszlo to safety and stay in Casablanca with Ilsa despite the danger, or sacrifice what his heart wants for the greater good and send Victor and Ilsa to safety while he fights the good fight. He picks the last option. Finally, Rick, representing America, makes an unselfish choice at the tail end of the film, after spending the first two acts only taking care of his own interests. Louis, representing the French, eventually sides with Rick and talks of working with the resistance. Although the French government surrendered to the Nazis, the French citizens would have none of it, and many bravely fought against their oppressors. When Rick says to Louis that this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, one of the most famous lines in the film, he is really saying this is the beginning of America attempting to liberate France and the rest of Europe from the Nazis. This is the beginning of an alliance. The nationalities of other characters are important as well. Victor Laszlo is Czech, and Czechoslovakia was taken over by the Nazi regime. In fact, nearly all of the characters who support Casablanca's anti-Nazi underground are from nations that resisted Germany. Ilsa is Norwegian. Sasha the bartender is Russian. Many of the film's criminal characters, such as Ugarte and Ferrari, have Italian surnames, and Italy was an ally of Germany during the war. The allegory in Casablanca is plain to see. Howard Koch, one of the screenwriters, was not shy in saying this. Even the word Casablanca means White House. Although one may say that if Casablanca is about a particular time in history, the subject matter has become dated. But, considering America and the world at large still struggles with the question of when and when not to engage, the film, perhaps, will always remain relevant.